Before I tell you what happened, I need you to understand one thing. The moment my entire family's world came crashing down wasn't planned. It happened on live television, in front of hundreds of thousands of people. At the same time, they sat in a restaurant completely unaware that the biggest mistake of their lives was about to be broadcast on the screen directly above their heads. My name is Jade Morrison, and this is the story of how I went from being the invisible daughter to the one person they couldn't look away from, even when they desperately wanted to. It started on a Tuesday evening in my studio apartment in Boston. I was covered in flour, my hair tied back in a messy bun, when I saw the email notification flash across my laptop screen. My stomach dropped before I even clicked it. Some part of me already knew this would change everything. I read the words slowly, letting them sink in. Then I read them again and again. This wasn't a nomination. This wasn't a maybe. This was confirmation that in 7 days I would be standing on a stage receiving the single most prestigious recognition a young chef could earn in this country. My first thought wasn't celebration. It was, I have to tell them. I opened the family group chat, the same one that had been mostly silent on my end for months, filled with my sister's selfie dumps and my mom's recycled motivational quotes. My fingers trembled as I typed. Hey everyone, I have some big news. Next week, I'm receiving a major award. There's going to be a ceremony that's being broadcast live on national television. I would really love it if you could be there, or at least watch. It would mean the world to me. I watched the read receipts pop up, one by one. Then the typing bubble appeared under my sister Brianna's name. It pulsed, stopped, started again. She was choosing her words carefully. When her message finally came through, I felt it like a punch to the chest. Seriously? You expect us to drop everything for some participation trophy? We already have plans. We're going to Giovanni's that night. Before I could even process that, my mom's message appeared underneath. Honey, you know we can't just cancel reservations. We've had this planned for weeks. You understand, right? I waited, staring at the screen, waiting for my dad to say something, anything. Instead, he just gave Brianna's message a thumbs up. That tiny icon hurt more than any words could have. I sat there for a long moment, staring at those messages, feeling that old familiar weight settled back into my chest, the one that told me I didn't matter, that I never would, not to them. I could have explained, I could have begged, I could have told them exactly what this award meant, what it represented, how hard I'd worked. Instead, I typed, okay, have a great dinner. Within seconds, they sent back a string of laughing emojis and a joke about ordering extra dessert. They had already forgotten about me. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have imagined, was that in exactly 7 days, while they were sipping wine and cutting into overpriced pasta, a television screen mounted on the wall above their table would force them to watch me accept an award they'd called meaningless. And every single person in that restaurant would turn to stare at them, knowing exactly who they were and what they'd done. But to understand why that moment shattered them so completely, you need to know how I got there. You need to know what it's like to grow up invisible in your own home. I grew up in Boston believing that what I experienced was normal. I thought every younger sibling just naturally faded into the background, while their older sister took up all the oxygen in the room. Brianna was 5 years older than me, and from the time I could remember, she was the sun around which our entire family orbited. She was loud, confident, magnetic, the kind of person who could turn a trip to the grocery store into content worth posting. She knew how to work a room, how to make people laugh, how to make our parents believe she was destined for greatness. My parents, Richard and Patricia, called it encouraging her potential, but what it really meant was that everything revolved around Brianna's mood, Brianna's schedule, Brianna's needs. I remember the year she didn't make the cheer squad. It became a household emergency. My mom cooked her favorite meal. My dad gave her a 20-minute speech about how the coach obviously had terrible judgment. We all sat around the table, validating her feelings while she cried into her mashed potatoes. That same year, I won a citywide junior cooking competition. I'd spent 8 weeks perfecting a dish, honey-glazed duck breast with roasted root vegetables. I'd practiced until my hands cramped, until I could do it blindfolded. When I told my mom I'd won first place, she smiled and said, "That's nice, sweetheart." Then immediately turned to ask Brianna how her Instagram photo shoot had gone. I was 12 years old, and that's when I learned there was a hierarchy in our family, and I was at the bottom. By 13, I'd figured out the only place I actually mattered was in the kitchen. While Brianna was out begging our parents for money to fund her influencer career, I was watching cooking videos on repeat, pausing and rewinding until I understood every knife technique, every temperature adjustment, every subtle trick that separated good food from unforgettable food. I started waking up early to bake. Simple things at first: blueberry muffins, chocolate chip cookies, rustic bread loaves. I'd pack them in containers and walk them over to neighbors just to see someone's face light up when they tasted what I'd made. That feeling, that moment of genuine appreciation, became everything to me. Eventually, I started selling my baked goods at the Sunday farmers market. I'd wake up before dawn, load everything into my mom's car, and set up behind a card table with a hand-painted sign. Strangers would stop, taste, and say things like, "Wait, you made this? How old are you?" For a few hours each week, I felt like I existed. At home, it was different. My dad would sigh every time he saw me in the kitchen, muttering about how I should be focusing on real career paths. My mom kept suggesting I should be more like Brianna, maybe try modeling, maybe think about marketing, something with a clear trajectory. They would sit and listen to Brianna talk for hours about engagement rates and brand deals, but when I tried to explain why I was experimenting with flavor profiles or testing new techniques, their eyes would glaze over. They'd nod politely, glance at their phones, and redirect the conversation back to Brianna. I remember thinking, they don't see this as who I am, they see it as a phase. Have you ever realized that the people who are supposed to know you best don't actually see you at all? That moment of clarity, that quiet, painful realization became the thing that pushed me forward. I stopped waiting for their approval. I started building something they couldn't ignore. I just didn't know yet how impossible it would become for them to look away. Leaving Boston felt less like pursuing a dream and more like escaping a role I'd been forced to play my whole life. When I got accepted into one of the top culinary programs in Chicago, my parents acted like I'd gotten into a fun cooking class, not one of the most competitive institutes in the country. Brianna laughed and said, "Wait, you're actually going to spend that much money just to learn how to chop vegetables? That's insane." My mom shushed her, but she was grinning. My dad hugged me at the airport and said, "Just make sure you have a backup plan, okay? Not everyone makes it in the food industry." I smiled, nodded, said all the right things. But inside, I made myself a promise. I would never come back as the girl they thought was playing make-believe. Chicago was brutal and beautiful and exactly what I needed. I worked 16-hour days, mornings at the Institute, nights at a cramped cafe in Wicker Park that smelled of burnt espresso and sourdough starter. I cut my fingers, burned my arms, cried in freezers, and woke up every single day desperate for more. One of my instructors connected me with a fine dining restaurant downtown, the kind of place I'd only ever read about. The head chef, Elena Moretti, had a reputation for ruthless. She yelled, she demanded perfection, and she noticed everything. I was terrified of her for weeks. Then, one night after I'd plated a deconstructed autumn vegetable dish with a miso glaze I'd been working on for months, she stopped. She studied the plate for what felt like forever, then looked up at me. "You have something to say with your food," she said quietly. Those 11 words changed my entire life. I started taking bigger risks. I began reimagining comfort food, making it lighter, brighter, more intentional, but still deeply satisfying. One night after service, I threw together a quick dish in the staff kitchen, a crispy cauliflower burger with a tangy yogurt sauce I'd been playing with for months. On a whim, I filmed it and posted it online. Within a week, the video had exploded. People were asking where they could buy the sauce. They were tagging friends. They were recreating it and posting their versions. For the first time, I realized my food could live beyond the kitchen I was standing in. I started bottling small batches of that sauce and selling it at weekend markets under the name Morrison's Kitchen. It was chaotic and imperfect and entirely mine. I called home to tell my parents the sauce had sold out at 4 different locations in one weekend. My mom said, "Oh, that's sweet," then handed the phone to Brianna so she could tell me about a new collaboration with the fitness brand. Once again, my news was just background noise. I hung up and stared out the window of my tiny apartment at the Chicago skyline, and I realized something important. The world outside my family was starting to believe in me. Maybe that would have to be enough. Morrison's Kitchen stopped being a side hustle the day a distributor tasted my sauce at a regional food expo and said, "We want this in stores. Let's talk." Within 2 years, my small batch operation became a full production line. I was still working brutal hours at the restaurant, but my off days were consumed by meetings about branding, logistics, scaling, distribution. It was overwhelming in ways my family never witnessed, because all they saw were the polished photos I posted when things went well. A prominent food writer described my sauce as the kind of innovation that could shift how everyday people approach healthy eating. That article got picked up by a national publication, then another. Things started moving faster than I could process. Morrison's Kitchen was accepted into a prestigious accelerator program for emerging food entrepreneurs. Suddenly, I was speaking at conferences, doing live cooking demos, talking about accessible nutrition to audiences who actually cared. That's how I ended up on the radar of people I'd only ever admired from afar. One cold afternoon, I was in my cramped office testing a new recipe when an email came through that made my heart stop. Subject line, James Beard Foundation Award Announcement. My hands were shaking as I opened it. I hadn't just been nominated, I'd won Rising Star Chef of the Year. There would be a ceremony in Los Angeles at a hotel I'd only ever seen in magazines, and it would be broadcast live on national television. I sat there in complete silence, trying to convince myself it was real. And then, despite everything, my first instinct was to share it with my family. I opened our group chat and typed out a message explaining what the James Beard Awards were, how significant this recognition was, how the ceremony would be broadcast live across the country, and how much it would mean to me if they could either attend or at least watch from home. I hit send and watched the message deliver. The typing indicator appeared, vanished, reappeared. Then Brianna's response came through. "Seriously? You expect us to drop everything for some participation trophy? We already have plans. We're going to Giovanni's that night." My mom followed immediately. "Honey, you know we can't just cancel reservations. We've had this planned for weeks. You understand, right?" My dad said nothing. He just reacted to Brianna's message with a thumbs up. I stared at that tiny icon and felt something inside me go quiet. The old version of me wanted to beg, wanted to explain why this mattered, wanted to make them understand. Instead, I took a slow breath and typed, "Okay, have a great dinner." They responded with emojis and a joke about ordering too much wine. And that's when I knew with absolute certainty, if they couldn't show up for me at the pinnacle of my career, they never would. What I didn't know was that the universe was about to make sure they had front row seats anyway. The night of the ceremony, Los Angeles felt like a dream compared to the cold, gray Boston I'd left behind. The Beverly Hilton was glowing, all polished marble and crystal chandeliers, and people who radiated success. I stood in the lobby holding my invitation, wearing a simple black dress I'd saved for months to buy, feeling like I'd accidentally walked onto the wrong movie set. Then someone pinned my name badge to my dress, Jade Morrison, Morrison's Kitchen. I looked down at those words and reminded myself, I didn't stumble into this, I earned it. Backstage, the atmosphere was electric. I saw chefs I'd only ever watched on TV. Producers were running final checks, camera crews were testing angles. Chef Alina has flown in and found me near the green room, pulling me into a tight hug. "Whatever happens tonight," she whispered, "you belong here. Don't you dare forget that." They called us to line up by category. When they announced the Rising Star nominees, my heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts. Meanwhile, 3 time zones away, my family was seated at their favorite Italian spot in Boston, Giovanni's, laughing over appetizers and debating which wine to order. I knew this because Brianna had posted a photo an hour ago. Glasses raised, smiling faces, caption, "Family dinner night, wine icon." No mention of me, no mention of the ceremony. The presenter's voice cut through my thoughts. And this year's James Beard Foundation Rising Star Chef of the Year goes to— There was a pause that felt endless. "Jade Morrison from Morrison's Kitchen in Chicago." The room exploded with applause. For a second, I couldn't move. Then my legs remembered how to work, and I found myself walking towards the stage, lights blazing in my eyes, the weight of the award suddenly solid and real in my hands. The host leaned close and whispered, "Big smile, you're live right now." Somewhere deep inside, the 13-year-old girl standing behind that farmer's market table started sobbing with relief. I gave my speech, short, shaky, honest. I talked about growing up feeling like what I loved didn't count, about wanting to create food that made people feel good without shame or restriction. I thanked the people who had seen me when it mattered most. I didn't mention my family. When I walked off stage, my phone was vibrating so violently I thought it might break. I ignored it. What I didn't know was that at the exact moment in Boston, the television mounted above the bar at Giovanni's had just switched over to the live broadcast. The restaurant was alive with conversation and clinking silverware when the announcer's voice suddenly cut through the noise. "Up next, our Rising Star Chef of the Year, a young woman who started selling baked goods at Boston farmers markets and is now transforming how people think about healthy, accessible food." The camera cut to my face on stage. My name appeared in bold letters across the bottom of the screen. Jade Morrison, Morrison's Kitchen. At the table directly beneath that television, my father's fork stopped midair. My mother's head slowly turned upward, her eyes going wide. Brianna's wine glass froze halfway to her lips as she stared at the screen, her brain visibly struggling to process what she was seeing. Around them, the restaurant went quiet. A server glanced from the TV to their table, putting the pieces together. Someone at the bar said loudly, "Wait, isn't that your daughter? Didn't you just say she was still messing around in cooking school?" Another diner had already pulled out their phone and started recording, capturing the exact moment my family realized the award they dismissed as meaningless was being broadcast above their heads to an entire restaurant full of witnesses. On the screen, I was smiling, holding my trophy, thanking the people who believed in me. Below, my family sat frozen in place, trapped beneath that glowing screen, with absolutely nowhere to hide. And that was just the beginning of what was about to unfold. By the time I got back to my hotel room, my phone looked like it was on fire. I finally pulled it out and unlocked the screen. The family group chat sat at the top, buried under more notifications than I'd seen in years. There were also dozens of Instagram tags, Twitter mentions, messages from people I hadn't heard from since high school. I ignored all of it, except the family chat. It was absolute chaos. My mom: "Jade, we just saw you on TV. Why didn't you explain how big this was?" My dad: "Everyone in the restaurant recognized you. The owner literally turned up the volume. We had no idea." Brianna's messages came in rapid succession. "Jade, what just happened? People were filming us." "Why didn't you say it was the James Beard Awards? I looked like an idiot." Then she sent a screenshot from her Instagram. The comments under her dinner photo were brutal. "Is this the sister who skipped the award ceremony?" Imagine calling a James Beard Award a participation trophy, Lamau. The secondhand embarrassment is real. Someone had already uploaded a video from Giovanni's to TikTok. The caption read, POV, you skip your sister's meaningless award and end up watching her win a James Beard on the restaurant TV above your head. The clip showed the television with my acceptance speech, then panned down to my family's table. Their faces were pale, frozen, completely exposed. It had over 1 million views already. Then I saw another video. Someone had stitched that clip with an old post from Brianna's page. In it, she was sitting in the back room of her boutique job, laughing into the camera. My little sister genuinely thinks she's going to change the world with salad dressing. Like, babe, this is real life. Your healthy sauce isn't going to pay bills. The comments were merciless. This aged worse than milk. The jealousy is embarrassing. Karma is undefeated. People were tagging her workplace, tagging me. The phrases toxic sister and family failure kept appearing over and over. My phone lit up with Brianna's name. I stared at it until it stopped ringing. A text followed. Please answer, I'm begging you. Part of me, the old part that always tried to fix things, almost gave in. Instead, I set the phone down and went to take off my makeup. When I finally saw her the next morning, it was because she'd shown up unannounced in the hotel lobby. I spotted her before she saw me, sitting hunched in a chair, eyes swollen, hair messily pulled back instead of perfectly styled like usual. When she looked up and saw me approaching, she shot to her feet so fast her coffee nearly tipped over. "Jade," she said, voice breaking. "Oh, thank God." We found an empty corner away from the main lobby. For once, she didn't immediately launch into talking about herself. She just blurted, "I got fired." I blinked. "From the boutique?" She nodded, swallowing hard. "They said the videos made the brand look toxic. They said I publicly mocked healthy eating. Now they're getting flooded with angry messages and 1-star reviews. They made me pack my desk in front of the entire staff." A bitter laugh slipped out before I could stop it. "So now my salad dressing is affecting real life?" She flinched like I physically struck her. "I know," she said quickly, desperately. "I know I was awful. I was jealous. You actually stuck with something. You actually made it work. I just didn't think it mattered. I didn't think you'd actually get this far." She wiped her eyes, smearing mascara across her cheek. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I need to start over, and I thought maybe you could introduce me to someone in your industry. Help me get a job, please." And there it was. Not just an apology, an ask. The old Jade would have crumbled immediately, but something had shifted inside me. "Brianna," I said, quietly, evenly, "for years, everything I did was a joke to you. My work was cute. My goals were pointless. You're not the reason Morrison's Kitchen was built, and you're not going to be the reason it hires anyone." She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "So you're just going to let me crash and burn?" I shook my head slowly. "No, I'm going to let you figure out your own life for the first time ever." Her eyes filled with fresh tears, but I didn't break eye contact. "I'm done being the invisible one in your story, and I'm definitely not turning my career into your safety net." Standing there in that hotel corner, I realized something profound. This was the first time in my entire life I'd spoken to Brianna without shrinking myself to make her comfortable. We stood in silence for a moment, listening to the hum of the lobby and distant elevator chimes. She let out a shaky breath and stared at the floor. "You're different now." I shrugged. "Not really. I just stopped pretending your words hurt." She gave a hollow laugh. "So what happens now? We just stop being sisters?" I shook my head. "No, we're still sisters, but I'm done trying to prove myself to you. I'm going to keep building my life. You're going to deal with the choices you made. That's how this works now." I didn't say, like last night, but we both knew exactly what I meant. The conversation ended without resolution. I gave her a brief, obligatory hug, then walked toward the elevator. As the doors closed, I watched her get smaller and smaller through the gap, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for walking away. The weeks after the ceremony were a whirlwind. Once that broadcast went live, Morrison's Kitchen exploded from niche brand to national conversation. My inbox was drowning in press requests, collaboration pitches, investment offers from people who wanted a piece of whatever momentum I'd built. One of those investors was Adrian Cole, a name I'd only ever seen in articles about successful food startups. We met at a minimalist cafe in LA that looked like it belonged on Pinterest. After some initial small talk, he set his phone face down on the table and got direct. "Jade," he said, "people aren't buying your sauce, they're buying your story. Have you considered giving them a space where they can experience that story in person? Not just a product, a place." I thought about those Sunday mornings at the farmer's market in Boston, standing behind that folding table, hoping someone would stop, hoping someone would care. I thought about every time my family dismissed what I was building as a hobby I'd eventually abandon. Now, someone was talking about my work like it deserved permanence. "Yeah," I said, "I've thought about it. I just never imagined it would happen this fast." Adrian smiled. "This isn't luck. This is what it looks like when years of invisible work finally becomes impossible to ignore." So we started building. It wasn't glamorous. There were brutal meetings that went nowhere, menu concepts that didn't feel right, budgets that made my head spin, design mock-ups that got scrapped and rebuilt from scratch. But for the first time, I had a team that actually believed in what I was creating. They didn't treat my ideas like cute experiments. They treated them like a vision worth investing in. When the first Morrison's Kitchen restaurant opened in Los Angeles, I walked in before we unlocked the doors and just stood there, taking it all in. Natural wood tables, an open kitchen where diners could watch every dish come together, shelves stocked with my sauces like small monuments. It felt like my childhood kitchen and that farmer's market table and every exhausting night shift in Chicago had all been distilled into one beautiful, permanent space. For opening week, I didn't hire influencers or throw a flashy launch party. I posted one simple video. If anyone ever told you the thing you love doesn't matter, this place is for you. Reservations sold out in hours. People didn't just come to eat, they came to share their stories. They told me about leaving corporate jobs to pursue photography, about being mocked for wanting to write or paint or code, about family members who dismissed their dreams as unrealistic. They sat at my tables, ate my food, and looked at me like I was living proof that they weren't crazy for believing in themselves. One quiet night after closing, I was sitting alone at the bar reviewing emails, absently picking at leftover roasted vegetables, when my phone buzzed. My mom. Since the awards, she'd been sending lengthy texts, apologies, updates, stories about friends at her book club who'd seen me on TV. I always responded politely but kept things surface level. This time, I answered the call. "Are you free?" she asked, her voice softer than I remembered. "Just finished closing," I said. "What's up?" She took a breath. "A parent reached out to me today. Their daughter wants to go to culinary school and they're terrified she's making a mistake. I told them about a girl from Boston who used to sell cookies at farmers markets and just won a James Beard Award." A pause. "I told them about you. I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk to her. Maybe over video sometime." I sat there, staring at the rows of wine glasses hanging above the bar. There was a time those words would have made me cry with relief. Now, I just felt a quiet warmth. "Yeah," I said. "Have her contact my assistant. We'll set something up." I heard her exhale like she'd been holding her breath. "Thank you," she said. Then, quieter, "I know I failed you in a lot of ways, Jade. I don't expect you to forget that, but I'm trying. I really am trying to do better." A few years ago, hearing that would have broken me wide open. Now, it just settled gently into place. "I know you're trying," I said, "and I appreciate that. But you need to understand, I've built a life that doesn't require your validation anymore. I'm not that kid waiting to be noticed." My mom gave a soft, shaky laugh. I think this is the first time I really hear that. After that conversation, things didn't magically become perfect with my parents, but they became real in a way they'd never been before. My dad started sending me photos of dishes he'd tried making from my videos. Terrible lighting, sloppy plating, captions like, "Crushed it, thumbs up, thumbs up." I teased him mercilessly, but underneath the jokes, I was genuinely proud. As for Brianna, she went completely silent after our hotel encounter. I heard fragments through my mom. She'd moved out of her expensive apartment downtown, found something affordable, taken a job at a regular retail store. No influencer perks, no free products, no brand collaborations. Just real work, no filters. Months later, an email appeared from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, "It's me." It was Brianna. She didn't make excuses. She described what it felt like packing her desk while coworkers watched. She wrote about sitting alone in her smaller apartment, realizing for the first time that online validation doesn't pay rent. She mentioned that one of her new customers, an older woman, had come in talking about that inspiring young chef on TV who makes healthy food that doesn't taste like cardboard, and how proud she was of that woman. "She knew I meant you," Brianna wrote. I stood there nodding and thinking, I called that award a participation trophy. "I don't expect you to fix this for me. You don't owe me a job or a connection or forgiveness. If you never respond to this, I'll understand. I just wanted you to know I finally see what I did, and I'm trying to become someone who doesn't tear down others just because she's terrified of never measuring up." I didn't reply immediately. The old me would have rushed to comfort her, to smooth things over, to make it okay. But the version of me who now signed emails, Jade Morrison, founder and chef, understood something crucial. I didn't owe anyone my success as their escape route. One evening after a long service, I set my phone up on the bar and hit record, intending to film a quick recipe tutorial. But what came out was something completely different. A lot of you have sent me messages saying your family thinks your dream is stupid. They call it a hobby, a phase, a waste of time. I wish I could promise you that if you work hard enough, they'll eventually see it. But that's not always true. I talked about growing up in a house where the thing I loved most was treated like background noise. I didn't name my family, but I didn't hide the truth either. Here's what I've learned. Sometimes the people who should believe in you first just don't. Not right away. Maybe not ever. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you might need to plant your dreams somewhere else first. At a market, in a tiny apartment, on a YouTube channel, wherever that looks like for you. I told them about seeing my own face appear on a restaurant TV while my family sat beneath it, realizing too late what they'd dismissed. The best revenge isn't making them suffer. It's building something so solid that their opinion stops defining your worth. When you're standing on your own foundation, they adjust or they don't. That part isn't your responsibility anymore. Your only job is to keep going. Keep cooking, writing, creating, building, whatever your version of sauce in a bottle is. That video spread like wildfire. People tagged their siblings, their parents, their partners. Some comments came from teenagers who sounded exactly like me at 13. Others came from parents saying the video made them rethink how they talk to their kids about their passions. Every single comment felt like confirmation that none of it, the late nights, the dismissals, the years of invisibility, had been for nothing. A few weeks later, long after closing, I stood alone in my restaurant kitchen. Everything was clean and in its place. The pans hung in perfect rows, the shelves were lined with Morrison's kitchen bottles. The dining room beyond was finally, blessedly quiet. I thought about the younger version of myself back in Boston, hovering in doorways, being told to get out of the way, being treated like her passions were just background noise. If I could go back to that moment, I'd put my hands on her shoulders and tell her, "Don't move. Keep cooking, keep testing, keep believing. One day, people will line up to taste what you make. One day, the exact thing they laugh at will become the thing that changes everything." Maybe that's the real truth buried in all this mess. Sometimes the last people to see your worth are the ones who should have seen it first. But you don't have to wait for them. You're allowed to build a life that makes sense to you, even when it looks like madness to everyone else. Whether they come around eventually doesn't matter as much as you think it does. Because either way, you're still the one walking into your own kitchen, turning on the lights, and doing the work that matters. And honestly, that's the only revenge worth having.